Eric von Däniken's hypothesis will have an increasing effect on society, science, literature, and art. The search for extraterrestrial intelligence is a concern that affects all of humanity.
For me, it's like souvenirs of the past. Some of our human forefathers had contact with extraterrestrials. They were here, they visited us, they were in contact. Something happened in the deep past, and it will happen again in the future.
The author of the sensational international bestseller and the most compelling non-fiction publication of all time is back in London for the first time in 25 years to celebrate Chariots of the Gods' 50th anniversary. Eric von Däniken Legacy Night. In this 2-hour special, you are invited to share with Eric his most influential discoveries and revelations. Learn about his incredible life journey as an author and researcher. Meet the team behind the highly anticipated Chariots of the Gods 360-degree entertainment franchise. Eric von Däniken Legacy Night, live streamed from the Princess Anne Theatre, BAFTA 195, Piccadilly, London, October 15th, 2016. For more information and to purchase tickets, please visit zoharstargate.com.
Now, here is a little bit closer map, and it shows here where we are, high up in the mountains, in a tiny village in where there are never more than 140 people at any time in the year. The valley is surrounded on all sides by large mountains filled with iron, copper, sulfur, and quartz. Like this huge outcropping of quartz that a group of us sat on to have lunch one day this past August. These gigantic loaves of quartz were all over the mountains there. Back in 1982, many people were reporting mysterious lights, and on September 25th, 1982, at 7:30 in the evening, engineer professor Erling Strand from Oslo was in Hessdalen to investigate because so many people had been reporting seeing all of these strange lights. Again, not structures, but lights that could glow with intensity, and some were being described as filling a valley with light. And as an engineer, he was baffled. What would be the energy source that could sustain over time that kind of intense lighting? To his amazement, he saw a large, bright white light that moved up above the hill, swinging right and left, and then beams emitted from the light, pulsing on and off for more than an hour. Professor Strand was determined to find out what the light was, and by 1984 he began a scientific investigation known as Project Hessdalen. To keep a constant surveillance on the valley, in August of 1998, he built what he calls an automatic measurement station on the side of a hill. The station now has 3 cameras which are triggered by certain frequencies of light events, and the cameras interface with computers inside the measurement station. The station now operates 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. Here is Professor Erling Strand from Oslo standing next to the measurement station that he calls the Blue Box. He teaches at the School of Computer Science at Oxford College in Sarpsborg, south of Oslo. To date, the cameras at the Blue Box have recorded more than 100 light events, of which 79 remain unexplained, including this photograph of the orange-tinted object taken by the monitoring station cameras on October 9th, 1998 at 6:16 p.m. local time. Then on December 4th, 1999, a little more than a year later, a videotape camera caught 12 seconds of what the scientists call a thermal plasma of unknown origin doing the strangest dance across the sky I think you will have ever seen. And now we're going to play this videotape. It happens quickly, And we're going to continue on into a Discovery Channel excerpt with Professor Strand about his research. This is in the day. And watch over here. No one knows what this is. But this is what people see in the Hessdalen Valley of Norway. And it has the glowing characteristics of a plasma with a strange motion. And now we're going to go into this segment with Professor Strand, done for Norway Discovery Channel on his work. Sound up full.
Jeg har alltid vært nysgjerrig på ukjente ting, og ting som kanskje ikke er så lett å forklare.
Subtitle. Oh, if you can't read it, strange and unexplained light.
Jeg heter Erling
My name
Strand,
is Erling
og
Strand, and I'm a
forsker på
researcher
UFO-fenomenet i
into the
Hessdalen.
UFO phenomena in Hessdalen.
I begynnelsen så ville ikke
Originally,
folk
people did not
snakke
want
med
to talk
hverandre om
about it.
dette her. De tørte ikke.
They didn't dare.
var,
It was
så
too
merkelig.
strange.
Den etablerte
The
vitenskapen
scientific
reagerte jo
establishment reacted
negativt på
negatively
disse observasjonene.
to these
De kom med
observations,
sine egne
and
forklaringer
they had
uten engang
their
å ha
own
vært i dalen. Da reiste jeg opp her for å kunne
expectations
se
without
dette
ever
her
visiting the
selv.
valley.
Jeg
And
ble
when I
heldig å
traveled
se
up
det
there,
selv
I was
første
lucky
dagen.
that I saw it on
Det var
my
et
first
sterkt
day.
lys,
It was
og
a
det
bright
lyste
light,
opp
and it was
bakken.
in the up in the
Det som
valley
forundret
below.
meg mest, det var intensiteten.
What surprised me
Da
the
husker
most
jeg
was its
at
intensity.
befolkningen
That was
hadde
when I
rett. De
knew
hadde
that the local
sett
people
noe
were right.
ukjent.
They had seen something unknown.
Da ingen etablerte
When
vitenskapsmenn
none of the
gjorde noe
established
forsøk på å finne
scientists
ut hva dette her var,
attempted to
så
find out what this
startet jeg og noen
was,
kolleger vårt eget
colleagues and
prosjekt.
I started our own project.
Her har vi apparatet som
This
har
apparatus
et sort-hvitt
controls the
kamera
black and white
påmontert.
camera,
Det
which monitors the
kontrollerer om det
appearance of
kommer et ukjent
unfamiliar
lys inn.
lights.
Med det nye systemet kan vi ta
The new
opp og
system
beregne
enabled us
avstand
to
via flere
calculate
kameraer.
distance.
Og ved to
Two
kameraer,
cameras function
akkurat som
like
du
a
har
pair of
to øyer,
eyes,
så kan du da beregne avstand.
which is how we measure distance.
I løpet av 3 år har
In
stasjonen
3 years,
registrert
the
nærmere
station
100
has
observasjoner.
made nearly 100
Noen
observations.
ganger er det som en gul
Sometimes it is like a yellow
rødt
ball,
lys
a
som
red
beveger seg
light which
irregulært.
moves irregularly,
Blinkende blå
bringing
lys.
blinking blue
Det har
light.
blitt målt med
They
en
have been
hastighet
measured
på
at speeds of
30
up
000
to
kilometer i timen.
30,000 kilometers per hour.
I begynnelsen kalte alle dette her
At first,
UFO, men
everyone
det vi
called
har
them
sett så
UFOs,
langt
but
er
what we
ukjente
see so
lysfenomen.
far
Det
are
er ennå
unknown
ingen
phenomena.
teori
There
som
is
passer
still
med
no
de dataene vi
theory
har.
about what this data is that we have.
Jo mer jeg har holdt på med dette her,
The more I
jo mer
work on this
merkverdig har det
strange,
blitt.
the stranger it becomes.
Hvorfor gjør jeg dette her?
Why
Det
do
er
I
for å
do this?
bevise for
To prove to
vitenskapen at det
science that
virkelig
there
er
really
noe.
is something
Og det er for å
here,
gjøre det slik
and to
at det
make
er
it
tillatt
acceptable
for folk
to people to
å
talk
fortelle
about
sine
their
opplevelser
experiences
uten å
without
bli
being
latterliggjort.
ridiculed. It's a familiar theme, isn't it? Well, end of that videotape. No. Everything is silent. It's another peculiarity in the crop fields as well as in Hessdalen and in Brazil and in other places. Some of the lights flash for only fractions of a second. Here is a time-lapse photograph taken overlooking the Hessdalen Valley by Dr. Massimo Teodorani, astrophysicist from the Institute of Radio Astronomy in Medicina, Italy. All those yellow-colored flecks are mysterious pulses of light that have been caught on this time-lapse frame that he and Italian colleagues and Erling Strand's Norwegian engineering team think hold the answers to a potential new energy source in plasma physics. That's what's keeping these guys going year after year. They think they're on the trail to something unexpected, unidentified, but that the thermal and light characteristics over time are suggesting that something has to be providing energy to these that is not understood and they think could be a key to something in the future. Other lights have moved and glowed for minutes, even up to 2 hours, leaving vivid red and yellow patterns in time-lapse photographs such as these, moving over the quartz, iron, sulfur, and copper mountains that surround Hessdalen. By August of 2000, Dr. Teodoranyi became so interested in Erling Strahn's research data that he decided to study the Hessdalen lights the same way that he studies the optical spectra of stars. The first joint Norwegian and Italian projects in Hessdalen were in 2000 and 2001 and continued on in August of 2002 when I joined them. They used radio spectrum analyzers, photographs, videotape, and spectroscopes. The first analyses broke the light phenomena down into two groups. 95% of all of the light phenomena is thought to be what they call thermal plasmas of unknown origin, and 5% unidentified solid objects because of the returns that they have gotten on radar. And they are as puzzling to them as the thermal plasmas of unknown origin, because there is nothing about the glowing solid objects that seems to act the way we would think of anything that was an aerial craft. Again, these are generally small and they glow, but they know from the radar signature that in some of these there is something solid. And that was of interest to me because if you look at some of the videotapes over the past decade taken, let's say, in England, there was the one by Steve Alexander back at the beginning of the 90s in which the light is moving across a field and casting a shadow. And many people have said, well, if it's casting such a hard shadow as it's moving across the field, doesn't that suggest that there might be something solid amid that glowing light? The plasmas emit long-wave radio frequencies, and very oddly, their temperatures do not vary with change in size or brightness. This is the single greatest surprise of all the research. The thermal temperature remains constant over time as long as an hour, even though during that time the apparent size and brightness of the object changes. Quoting from Dr. Teodoranyi's 2001 research summary, quote, "We saw that those lights were changing shape suddenly from very big to very small, and the phenomena was there standing still. But the temperature was constant because we measured the temperature in both phases. So there must be some kind of self-heating mechanism that keeps the temperature constant, and this is highly anomalous. Some general characteristics of the mysterious thermal plasmas are these. The light balls are not single objects. Here, 1, 2, 3. These are all appear to be a bundle like grapes. They are constituted of many small components which are vibrating around a common center. And there was a videotape that was at Barbary Castle about 3 years ago in which, under close analysis, there seemed to be two balls that were closely doing this as it traveled, and then a third ball came up and passed them. The light balls are able to eject smaller light balls. The light balls change shape all of the time. The luminosity increase of the light balls is due to the increase of the radiating area. The mechanism for that increase is still not understood, but after his 2002 research this past year, Dr. Teodoranyi speculated the answer is in the multiplying numbers of light balls. But what causes the light balls to eject more luminous spheres and to increase in number and size, staying clustered, is still a mystery. Dr. Teodoranyi says, quote, "The cause and the physical mechanism with which radiation is emitted is currently unknown. Whatever is the cause which triggers the Hessdalen lights, there is a central force of unknown origin that is created. Thus, the main goal of our research group is to find out how these lights work in a physical sense." This past August of 2002, between the 5th and the 11th, I was invited to join Dr. Theodorani and Erling Strand in their third year for the joint Italian and Norwegian project Hessdalen. We all stayed in a schoolhouse together that is in Hessdalen, and we had a ball there day, night. It seemed as if we moved into a timeless zone, because even at 1 o'clock in the morning, it was still sort of like 6 or 7 o'clock of twilight, with the being so high north. And we'd come off of 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock night watch and go back down to the school where we all stayed. And everybody would break out wine and sit up till like 4, and it still felt like we were in the afternoon talking about what had happened. And we just went on in this kind of endless days of searching after things and hardly ever sleeping. And the school is right down the road from this beautiful church, painted red like the barns and houses throughout the valley. It's a color that everybody calls Hessdalen red, and it makes the entire Hessdalen valley look like something on a Christmas card. The roofs are made of grasses growing in soil that the residents claim are the most efficient heating and cooling roofs in the world. And here is Erling Strand, who is talking with Bjorn Borg and one of his friends from Oslo before we were getting ready to go set up some radar for the night. And we followed Erling Strand several times up into the big mountains, where these big mounds of quartz, there were so many, made us all wonder, is there something about the geology of this area and the interaction perhaps with thunderstorms? There were none when we were there, but with thunderstorms that might set up some kind of electrical phenomena that interacts with all of this quartz and mineral-rich surrounding. In all of these mountains, in which you can see defined tree levels, and then all around 360 degrees, that is all these big, huge stone mountains, and there's nothing up there. There are no trails, there are no roads, there's no electricity, no structures. There's just these big, massive, hulking mountains that sit up above the tree line and the valley that is down below. We often wondered, are the mysterious lights in Hessdalen connected to these minerals in the geography? And that goes to the question that we've raised here in this room in previous conferences. Could limestone, for example, another kind of crystal that makes up the British Isles and Germany's Isle of Rügen and the U.S. regions as Missouri and Arkansas and Texas, where there are lights, are they linked again there to the geography? Is there something about what we'll call thermal plasmas of unknown origin that focus around or interact because of certain geographies on this planet? Are we dealing with a plasma physics that has escaped truly the attention of physicists, and how is that possible? And is the same plasma force involved in all of these different phenomena, from the Hessdalen Valley to worldwide crop formations to the puzzling lights that people have seen not only in Marfa, Texas, and Dover, Arkansas, but in Brazil, South America, and in many places around the world? And if so, why do many of these lights that may be plasmas react as if intelligent, or at least respond to changes in the environment around them, as Erling Strand and others have witnessed? And I'd like to share with you a brief excerpt from an interview that I did with Erling Strand in Hessdalen in August that is about his own first-hand experience that convinced him that the Hessdalen lights, whatever they are, act with intelligence. Let's have audio cut number 1.
We wanted to do a test with a laser. Well, the reason was that the people had told us that when they use a spotlight pointing towards the light, it disappears. And when we prepared a field investigation, which we ran back in '84, we instead of using this big spotlight, we use a laser instead, red laser, which wasn't so strong, but a flashing light was coming, and we pointed the laser towards it, and suddenly the flashing frequency doubled. And we was surprised because we hadn't expected that. So we took the laser down again, and the flashing become as it was before. And we took the laser up again, and the same thing happened. It doubled the frequency. 1 week later, there was a light that was seen around our feet, which was a red light, as if there was a laser pointing down on the snow. But there was no laser present at that time. So that was really strange.
And when you saw that light on the snow that seemed to resemble a laser, what went through your mind about the implications?
Well, it's a difficult question. It's the more you study, the more strange it is, and it's really strange. It's not easy to find one answer on what it can be, but I think we can learn a lot of it, and we can learn well, where come all the energy from? Because you have stories when people tell the part of the valley has been illuminated in the middle of the night, and there must be a huge amount of energy. And where does all this energy come from? That's one question. And why does it dim the light when the airplane is moving? Why does it react on laser? Well, there's a lot of questions.
And now I want to share with you some scenes that I shot with my own Sony digital video camera in both natural light and night vision mode during my week in Hessdalen. And the night watches were devoted to the challenge of capturing these unpredictable appearances of these mysterious lights on cameras and with scientific instruments, knowing that they would probably appear, but never knowing exactly where, and my being shocked at how quickly it could appear and how intense it'd be. So let's go to the next video. The Hessdalen researchers drove up each night around 10 p.m. onto a hill above the valley famous for mysterious lights. Radar gear was set up by Dr. Stelio Montebignoli and his colleagues from Italy's Medicina Institute of Radio Astronomy. Telescopes, cameras, spectroscopic lenses, night vision video recorders, binoculars, and other gear were also assembled. The beautiful sunsets faded to bright twilight in the Norwegian summer sky, but there never was complete darkness so far north. The Hessdalen Valley has a small population, only about 140 people. Those residents use electric lights, burn fires, and drive tractors and cars. Sometimes those ordinary lights can confuse scientists searching for the unusual lights. But over the years, from this hilltop facing south, many people have seen the bright flashes. The August 2002 field trip had some surprises in the sky and behind us. During our second night on the hill, August 7th, astrophysicist Dr. Massimo Teodorani from Italy noticed a light flash on a far back mountain. As I turned my camera to see if the light would reappear, I was surprised to see a rapidly pulsing, sparkling light that lasted for several minutes and remained unidentified.
It's like one of those flashes.
By the fourth night, on August 9th, I was coming to understand how difficult it is to study a phenomenon as unpredictable as the sudden flare-up of the Hessdalen lights. There was frustration in hearing a voice yell about a light appearance, but not being able to get a camera or telescope on it before the light was gone again.
What are we looking at?
Over your head, Masha.
This night, Massimo had again seen a flare on the back mountain far beyond the Hessdalen Valley. Those mountains are not inhabited, and lights were flaring and pulsing above the sparse tree line.
Il fisso si muove quella parte.
Si muove, come no?
Sopra. Un satellite.
What are we looking at?
No, you're in the hill.
The hill. Can you look across the valley?
A few minutes later, Massimo yelled again to look up.
We don't see it right this
Aeroplano.
second, but it's been coming
No.
off and on.
Guarda come va.
Up
Oh,
there.
certo.
Up above the mountain. I just saw it come in.
There's one overhead earlier.
Oh, my God. The light was in the sky. This time, I managed to pick up my camera and tripod fast enough to at least get some of the odd moving light on videotape.
I don't know.
The erratic motion is my holding the camera and tripod in the air, trying to focus on the light above us in night vision mode.
No, it's not a
Okay,
plane,
yes, it's
absolutely.
giving
No.
No! And Massimo, I was looking at the sky and it just popped
Yes. Look, it's going up. Another one.
The next night, on August 10th, Norwegian engineer Bjorn Hogue yelled out to us to look behind. As I rotated my camera around, I saw an extremely bright, pulsing light on the mountain next to us, a rugged mountain of bare rock. Bjorn, how did you see that? There it is. Got it. Got it.
Back again.
Yep. It's like fishing with your bare hand. Then I turned my camera back toward the Hessdalen Valley, and another light flared up on that back mountain again.
Did you see it, Masha?
Yes, I got it.
You see it? Yes, sure.
Now, here is a photograph taken by Dr. Teodorani of one of the mysterious lights that made up these multiple balls of the thermal plasmas of unknown origin. And one night we were talking about how they were baffled, especially by this ability of what they were getting from instruments of whatever this was to sustain a high temperature over time that defies what they know is possible in nature. And I'd like you to just hear a very interesting excerpt from Dr. Teodorani, a highly respected astronomer, who has now been pushed to I'll call it a new level of thinking, and that's what he said. He said, I cannot help but wonder, could we be dealing with advanced intelligences so advanced that they take one of the more common properties of the universe, plasma, and they are able to program it with zeros and ones the way we are programming computers, but that they can keep these plasmas around on different planets to monitor and do work, moving, living, sustaining, but sustained by what? Here is Dr. Teodorani.
I can say that if we are able to probe with nanotechnology already now, I wouldn't wonder at all if someone else is able to make so that a plasma is intelligent, in the sense that it contains informations, or you can give order to it. We are able to give order to the DNA to make computers now. So what happens when we will be after 1 million years, or maybe less, 1,000 years, maybe we will be able to educate not only a DNA or chips, but also a plasma to make all the orders that we want. So I cannot exclude that some intelligence is able to do that, to educate a plasma to make several actions. I cannot exclude, but I cannot demonstrate it scientifically, of course.
The challenge that we all have, how to prove to this planet that the physical evidence is there of Earth mysteries that need to be studied, and how do you prove something that may fall into the category of advanced technology that can even work at molecular levels that right now we still cannot? If these luminous phenomena are monitoring devices, as he suggested, who or what would be doing the monitoring? Who would program plasmas and other materials to monitor the Earth life on it, and why? And now we're going to jump from Norway to Brazil. Maybe. Okay. What we've got in this map is here showing Rio de Janeiro, here is Sao Paulo, here's Campo Grande, and out here, 2 hours north, is an area of Rochedo, and near it is this tiny farming community of Corguinho, Brazil. And we're having trouble with this, I guess. Should we try to go back? Okay. I was going to show a little tighter close-up on the map, but that's all right. The Rio de Janeiro, Sao Paulo is a city of 18 million people flying over it. It is absolutely mind-boggling. I've never seen anything in the United States that looks like Sao Paulo. It is civilization stretched to the max over such a gigantic land area that it takes your breath away. And then a half hour by airplane northwest of Sao Paulo, you land at Campo Grande in the state of Mato Grosso do Sul, and you've already jumped down from 18 million to about 850,000. And then you get into a four-wheel truck, and we drove for 2 hours on roads that had ruts that were at least 4 feet thick. I could not, or 4 feet down. I have never driven for 2 hours on such rough roads. And that gets you to Rochedo, known as Little Rock. And then you go further, about 27 kilometers, to get to Corguinho. It is a breathtakingly beautiful place. And this particular photograph was after a rainstorm, and this is the big mesa that dominates Corguinho, and all of this is farmland down here. And the area that we are involved with is on this western side of the mesa, and there's another farm on the east side. A whole series of things have happened. There's much that happens around this mesa, but interestingly enough, the greatest phenomena is actually to my back as I'm taking the photograph, which is another hill. All of these areas you can see in the back. It's valleys coming up into big mesas. You can see more there, and here is another. It's coming up into a smaller hill, and that's this whole topography are mesas, valleys, hills, and palm trees right next to cactus. It is a desert tropical mix, and it is almost solid iron everywhere that you go. Now, that mesa is where the man, Uringer Oliveira, has a farm, and we're going to be talking about an event that happened there on September 15th, and I'm going to try to orient you a little bit about him and his family. This is Uringer's wife, Jessica, and their 2-year-old son, and she is standing on the porch. Their house is not even finished being built. They are not a wealthy family. They're not even a middle-class family. It's a very minimal house that's in the process of being built. And on this particular night of September 15th, 2002, she and boy were in Sao Paulo visiting relatives. And part of the reason is because Uringer Oliveira has had, over a period of his life since he was 13, an ongoing kind of, but periodic, intermittent interaction with what he calls tall, blonde beings. And he had told Jessica and his son, his parents live on this farm, cousins, it's a large extended family-run farm, that he had gotten communication through what he calls a plasma ball. It's interesting that in the Portuguese to English translation that I was hearing that word plasma yet again going down to Corguinho. And why was I there? Because on this night of September 15th with his wife and son away in Sao Paulo, really I think at his recommendation. And he was at the house. His family went up because of an event that we're going to see here in a minute, and found this bedroom empty, and it had this strange body print here and one in the ceiling. Here's a closer look of the bed sheet. And here's a closer look at the ceiling. And the first time that I saw the photographs of this body print and the bed and the ceiling was in December of 2002 in photographs that were taken by a Brazilian businessman named Felipe Branco. He's the owner of what is called Castelo Branco Fazenda in Campo Grande. Here's Felipe Branco, third generation businessman. His family has owned ranches and businesses in Italy and Brazil for 3 generations, and they have a ranch in Campo Grande, and he has known Urangir Oliveira, the farmer, since about 1996, because Felipe Branco, the businessman, had privately had his own encounters with missing time and beings, and then he heard about Urangir Oliveira having what appeared to be some kind of encounters in this land area in Corguinho, Brazil, and they met each other and became friends. This is a travel agent out of Rio de Janeiro who just travels around Brazil and takes groups and is extremely skilled in 5 languages, and his name is Luciano Didier, and Luciano and Felipe were the 2 English translators. Urangir Oliveira speaks only Portuguese. Now, just a little bit of background before we start going into some of the events that happened on September 15th, 2002. Urangir Oliveira was born on March 14th, 1963, in a rural area outside of Sao Paulo, and is now 40. Urangir had 5 brothers and 3 sisters, and his father was a city service employee. By age 8, Urangir realized that when he fought over food with his brothers and sisters at the kitchen table, his hands gave off some kind of energy, that's what his mom called it, that would bend and twist the metal utensils whenever he picked them up if he was in a particular energy state, which was often quarreling with his brothers and sisters. He remembered once throwing a fork with anger and was amazed, along with the rest of his family, as the fork hit the table and then kept the tines and the fork kept bending and twisting as it laid on top of the table, shades of Uri Geller. Urangir Oliveira recalls physical abductions from here, from where he lived around Sao Paulo, beginning when he was 13, and then 27, age 35, and the last being September 15, 2002, when he was 39, with these tall, blonde humanoids, plus another encounter in Sao Paulo with the blonde humanoids when he was 23 years old. According to him, they were alive and walking around in an area of Sao Paulo where a very dramatic experience occurred with him, which at some other point in another time I might discuss, because there's so much to go into here today. Now, Felipe Branco was at the Urangir Oliveira farm in Corguinho, Brazil, at 7:30 p.m. on September 15th, because Urangir had called him and had let his family know and had let friends know that he had gotten information through one of these plasma balls, which they've all seen around that farm, same parent kind of plasma balls that we were talking about earlier, or at least in terms of appearance. What are they? That's what we're all trying to find out. And that the communication was that on or before 10 o'clock on September 15th, 2002, that the blonde humanoids were going to take him physically from his house and at some point He had to be there and to be ready. So the Leap is driving in, just coincidentally. He had been late. He had expected to be there earlier. And he was driving into the driveway that comes into the farm at almost exactly 7:30 p.m. when he heard all the sound on his truck, saw coming down on his windows, onto the road in front of him, and in the lights was a rain of rocks. And Uringer had told everybody in the family that the beings had explained to them that at the time that he would be taken, that there would be a rain of rocks from the sky, and it would be a signal that he had gone. Gosh, I wonder why these keep locking up. Uringer made this sketch for me of the tall blonde beings that he has encountered during these various times, and says this is the exact being that was involved in the September 2002 event. And he said the blonde beings in these communications with these plasma lights had shown him somehow that he sees these pictures, whether the light projects them, whether it's an interaction with his mind, he's not exactly clear, but they had actually showed him that from all of the iron dust that surrounds the area, that there would be an interaction with this technology that they were going to use to transport him, and that one of the side effects would be all of these round rocks. And rocks did begin to fall at 7:30 p.m. on September 15, 2002. A visitor to the farm named Fabrizio da Silva captured some of the event on videotape, and I'm going to begin with that as we go back to the night of September 15, 2000. Uringer telepathically understood from the tall blonde being who met him in this craft that he was to enter this, what he calls, bubble. It felt like air conditioning against his skin when he stepped through its wall, and he understood that the bubble provided germ decontamination, energy balancing, and the creation of a glowing leotard-like suit that automatically seemed out of nowhere to appear on his body and replace the cotton underpants that he was wearing. When he laid down on the bed, it's a hot climate, the only thing he had on were thin cotton undershorts. The tall blonde male directed Uringer towards stairs, and they climbed to the next floor, where Uringer was to remain for the next 3 Earth days, watching wall screens of images about the Earth, this solar system, and the galaxy under the guidance of this being that he has drawn, about cosmic and Earth events that will culminate on December 22nd, 2012, with some kind of galactic event that will affect life on Earth. During our February 10th, 2003 interview about his experience, I asked Uringer if he and the blonde beings were in the same room for all 3 days. He said yes. Quote, "It's like the walls were endless. I walked, but I never reached the walls. So it gave the impression that the room was really big," unquote. I explained to him that other abductees have described, quote, "infinite interiors," unquote, in non-human craft before, and have been given information, but that time and space are somehow distorted within craft. But Uringer did not have such knowledge. On the evening of September 18, 2002, when the farm was relatively quiet, the tall blonde being walked Uringer down the stairs in the craft to the place that he said he both entered and left here, that had that same violet light in it. There he went back into the bubble where the silver glowing leotard-like suit dematerialized from his body, and his own cotton underpants materialized back on him again. He was put back in the violet beam and lowered into his bedroom, paralyzed in the same position he said that he had originally laid on the bed. The room was dark, and he could not see any details, but the very first sensation that he had as his body touched the bed again was stiff scratching on his skin. That scared him, and he jumped up and he flipped on the light. He was so shocked by the body print in the bed sheet, pillowcase, and the ceiling that he said his heart started racing with fear, and he touched himself, feeling that he must be burned, and he reached for the door to get out of the room, but it was locked. from the outside, a security measure that Philippe Branco had taken on the night of September 15th to preserve what was in the bedroom. Uringer had no telephone in the room, and the only way that he could communicate was with an intercom system if somebody was at the other end of the intercom in the farm. And fortunately that night, somebody heard his intercom saying, "I am back, come and get me out of the bedroom." Now, after seeing Philippe's dramatic photographs for the first time, he was one of the ones in that crowd around the bed on that night with his videotape, I phoned Philippe Branco in Campo Grande, and we did interviews for both earthfiles.com and for radio. And I asked him at the time about was anyone getting samples from the bed sheet and the ceiling to scientists to analyze. He said, no, we don't really know what to do. And he invited me to visit him and his family in Campo Grande in order to go to Uringer's farm to collect physical samples from the bed, the ceiling, and the surrounding environment, where even rock in one place has melted in the presence of glowing lights that have expanded and contracted, come out of hills, gone into hills, very similar to things reported in other parts of the world, but in this case, in Corguinho, melted rock. On February 8th, we traveled on these rough dirt roads to Uringer's, well, we'll get past the bedroom, to Uringer's farm. And my slides seem to be... It's supposed to be different, but anyway, I'll just keep going here. Yeah, but there, okay. We traveled on these rough dirt roads to Uringer's farm, and as you can see, the soil is red everywhere with iron. Cattle graze all over Mato Grosso do Sul, which is Brazil's biggest cattle-producing state. But none of them were really directly aware of mutilations in that particular area, which I thought was interesting. Uringer Oliveira and his family have a 209-acre farm on the west side of the big Corguinho Mesa, and he bought this farm in 1996. Convinced from the geology, and this is supposed to be natural geology in Corguinho, that he thinks makes contact easier with these blonde beings. This pyramid-shaped mesa in the mist is an example of many of the unusual objects that surround you in the terrain when you move around. And Uringer, there on this farm, produces organic foods. He operates a small bed and breakfast for tourists who come to visit for the beauty and for a chance to see mysterious lights. And every once in a while, some of the people there up on the hill encounter non-human beings. In the past, Uringer called his farm Project Portal, or Doorway, because of his efforts to make human and non-human communication possible there. He feels, like so many people in the abduction syndrome, that he has some personal responsibility to try to communicate to people some of the things that he's been shown and told on these craft. Whether or not they are true or not, there have been how many hundreds and hundreds of abduction cases over the last 30-some years in which there have always been stories and reports about screens, about some sort of danger coming in earth catastrophes in the future, but there are so many different ones. How does anybody know how to deal with the information? But in his case, like so many of the others, he feels a personal responsibility to let people at least know that he thinks that in this area that it is possible to communicate with these beings more easily. And he has now changed the name. It is no longer Project Portal, has not been for some time. The farm is called Ecovilla, and that is because his focus is now on producing organic foods. I went to Uringer Oliveira's home on February 9th to collect these samples from the bed and ceiling. And I was puzzled when I realized three facts as I photographed and gathered cloth and wood. First, if a body leaves the bed on September 15, 2002 and goes through the ceiling, that would seem to me that there should be two patterns. Something that would show an exit and an entrance, what I was talking a little bit about in the videotape. Well, Urendir, in more detail, in another part of the interview, said that, because we were refining our English-Portuguese translation, that in fact the paralysis of the body was, from his understanding, it was either programmed specifically so that the molecules, he kept stressing, everything that is happening in the molecules of my body. It is at a molecular level, and it is important that those molecules be in the same position for a portion of this moving in and out. And that this molecular precision is necessary to pass his body matter through other matter, such as wood ceiling. Another question was, are the beings capturing time and playing it back, so to speak? Another concept that has come up in other abduction cases and from some people in the military, and that returning time or changing time and rocking it back and forth might be able to accomplish such precision. Urendir says that he knows the beings do use and manipulate timelines, but that he is uncertain if such application of time was involved in his particular September 15th to September 18th transport in and out of the bedroom. Second, I noticed that the body pattern in the ceiling appeared to be further east toward the headboard of the wall and slightly to the right of the body imprint in the bed sheet. And we all talked about it there, wondering, a kind of logical speculation, could this be the result, the consequence, that if he is literally describing what happened, then his body was in a motion, but rising and moving forward, and that might explain why there is an offset between the body and the ceiling and the one on the bed. Third, as I mentioned in the videotape, neither the right hand nor the feet made any imprints on the sheet or in the ceiling. The right hand was holding the book off the edge of the bed, and both Urendir's feet hung out over the end of the bed, as he had explained. And I asked him why he thought then that even the feet and the hand would not have some kind of a mark in the ceiling. He is uncertain about answers to many of these questions, but he said that he understood from the non-humans that the energy beam that lifted his body was so precisely tuned to the molecules of his body in order to separate it from the bed sheet, and that his right feet and right hand were already in the air, and thus this beam technology did not have to exert the same kind of energy to separate them from something because they were already in the air. That's just a speculation from him. And I learned from analytical chemist Phyllis A. Budinger in Ohio that the blue threads in this bed sheet are cotton, and the white threads are polyester, and the blue and white threads are woven together throughout the sheet, and it turns out that the pillowcase is also woven white polyester and blue dyed cotton. But there is great variability in the body imprint from what looks like burned and charred cloth right next to cloth by a separation of only 1 millimeter, with only slightly darker blue discoloration that makes up most of this body print. The majority of it is not scorched. It is just a darker blue. And this was especially interesting when Phyllis and I and biophysicist Levengood first talked, because Phyllis got out the dictionary of chemistry to check what were the melt temperatures for polyester and for cotton. And for cotton will decompose at about 300 degrees Fahrenheit, or have a scorch to it, and polyester has a melt temperature of 500 degrees Fahrenheit, and there's that 200 degrees difference. And we've got a bed sheet that is clearly showing that there's all kinds of subtle changes, which upon microscopic examination we'll get into, revealed some other startling things. And the first questions were, how could you have these melted polyester threads that are making up the dark blue amid the cotton without the cotton being either not scorched and in some cases not even brown, just the body print looking this darker blue? And Levengood's first reaction to what he was looking at, both in the samples and then under the microscope, was that he was seeing very precise and compartmentalized energy interaction with this bed sheet. And we sort of related it to the same kind of compartmentalized, precise energy that we have seen in crop circles. And under the microscope at 40 power magnification, he began to show what the bed sheet would look like. And we know that we are looking at the white polyester and the blue dyed cotton here. Makes the color blue. Well, when you go to those areas that look blue, that darker blue, like it's wet, and when you're standing in the room, it looked like you were looking at something that was wet. It is because of this vitreous or melted quality of the polyester. And in the beginning of the reports, both on the radio and at earthfiles.com, we were emphasizing confusion about this, both from the chemists and from the biophysicists, because you had a 200-degree spread in terms of polyester melting at a temperature that was 200 degrees more than it technically or classically cotton would be known to scorch or brown. Well, I have taken some of the microscopic work, and I'm now dealing with a textile expert. And it turns out that the big important factor, which is unknown, is time, the timeline. You can get cotton exposed up to, let's say, 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit for a short period of time, short. And it is cellulose and it will not scorch in carbon. But if it goes for a longer period of time, you will get scorch and burn. That is potentially how we could have melted polyester at 500 degrees Fahrenheit with the cotton right next to it. We're talking millimeter, in some cases fibers and microns, where the cotton is unaffected right next to the melted polyester, but that would mean that whatever the exposure was, it was extremely short. And Uringer Oliveira said that there was this flash, and then the color. We've got his testimony. So whatever happened may have happened quickly. If it involved a high temperature, we still have the question, why was he not burned? Well, bodies do have a moisture. This is how people can walk across coals. There was moisture on his body. If this was a very short exposure of something, and we don't exactly understand what this energy system is, then it may have instantaneously melted the polyester, not scorched the cotton at a high temperature everywhere, and not burned him. But it still leaves then a lot of the puzzles about why there is such a complexity of mixtures of the very scorched and melted and burned right next to absolutely perfect untouched material. So, and now we're back to biophysicist Levengood saying that whatever happened on this happened with such precision that the compartmentalization of energy that created this, as far as he's concerned, is not explicable as of this time. Now, to show that whatever was happening here is not completely thorough and not completely understood, this arrow is just pointing at an example. You can see it throughout these others, that there are still fibers of the polyester that are inside the melted polyester that have not melted. So within some of the melted polyester fiber, there are still fibers that we can see in there. So many people hearing that, oh, this must be a hoax, have sent emails saying, well, you could do this with a candle, you could do it with a blowtorch, you could do it with an iron, you could do it with a curling rod, you could, and on and on. And I've talked with Levengood and with Phyllis Budinger and with the textile people about this. And Levengood says, absolutely not. He emphasizes that each thread is roughly a little over 0.4 millimeters in diameter, The fibers that make up the threads are down in the micron region, which is 1/1,000,000th of a meter. For example, one blood cell is 7 microns in diameter. Each thread is composed of maybe 100 fibers, and the same is true with the cotton. The fibers in both materials are roughly the same diameter, so changes in the bed sheet and the pillowcase in this instance have occurred right down to the thread and even the fiber level. And this is where you start to get into the baffling part of this case. This photomicrograph was taken in a transition region where the cotton threads changed from the blue up here down to brown in a space of 2 millimeters. What you're looking at is magnified under a microscope and is 2 millimeters from here to here. And in that region between the blue at the top and the brown at the bottom, the blue-dyed cotton threads become very pale in color. And in a space of 2 millimeters, whatever this energy is that affected this bed sheet has changed from heating the polyester to seemingly not affecting the blue cotton. And bottom line, whatever happened, it means that something on this bed sheet could keep one part cool only 2 millimeters from something else that was really hot. And in some of these places, the carbon, the burned, absolutely burned, carbonized, scorched, can be right next to an area that is completely unaffected, and that you find all of this compartmentalization all over this bed sheet. This is a photomicrograph of the layer of material that was underneath the bed sheet. So all that was on this little bed was this bed sheet, the pillowcase around the pillow, and then underneath was a thin mattress that had this polyester mattress pad on it. And this is what it looks like normally. And now this is perhaps one of the most interesting of the photomicrographs. We have many more of these. We found other places where this has occurred. And you can see that this thread is missing here. But where it would have crossed these horizontal woven threads here, it's melted. And none of the other polyester threads around it seem to have been affected at all. And as Levengood said in sending me this photograph and looking at others, that the energy has been so compartmentalized and so finely tuned that it could affect this one fiber, cause that one fiber melt without affecting the others, is again underscoring that whatever happened to this sheet right now falls in the category of a control on heat that can melt polyester and not scorch cotton, or melt polyester and scorch the cotton, or melt polyester and seemingly not affect the cotton at all, and a lot of variations on that theme. Well, what about the ceiling? Here is a sample. It was a lot of work to get this out of the ceiling, let me tell you. This came from the right arm, and I'm showing this to, here is on the side, Levengood measured this. We were curious if the scorch would keep going up. Would it be affected through the ceiling and up into the little rafters, and had a red tile ceiling? While I was there, we did have, I think it was Uringer climbed up to see if there was anything on the tiles, because I asked the question and nobody had investigated. Well, as it turned out, this seems to be very thin, 4 millimeters, and very consistent in the sample piece that I was able to get. And right now, I can't tell you much more except that it appears that whatever interacted with the ceiling, it really affected a very, very thin layer, and then it didn't affect anything more in the ceiling. Another interesting side note while I was doing the photographs, I noticed this around the head. Here's his torso and the right arm and the legs in the head. And because I was climbing up on ladders and trying to do things, I was actually getting up closer to the ceiling, and Uringer and Philippe and nobody had done that. And I asked them about this, what looks like the classic old Renaissance literature of the halos around the head. And in fact, when you're there close to the ceiling, it's very finely radiating. It's extremely fine with huge color variation. It was really quite astonishing. And they hadn't seen it. They didn't even realize that it was there. And Uringer said, well, it may have something to do with protecting, or something having to do with the head emitting energy, but I'm just pointing it out because it does look a lot like the auras that used to be in some of the old paintings. Now these stones, there are at least 23 people who were there around the farm that night of September 15th at 7:30, including Philippe Branco, the businessman, who you couldn't help because so many of the roofs are metal in the bed and breakfast. And as Fabrizio said, when the rocks came down, it scared him because the sound was so loud. Philippe said that there were so many rocks falling on his truck for what he thought was about 7 to 10 seconds. There seemed to be like a massive fall, and then after that, for several minutes, there were rocks that were falling more intermittently, and that's when Fabrizio, by the time he got his digital camera out and was running, rocks were still falling intermittently on the roofs. And people collected dozens and dozens, bags and bags of these from around on the ground. And this is an example of the typical kind of rock. See if I have one. I think this is the end one. Yeah. Okay, go back. Maybe it won't go back. Will it go back? Okay. And what I can tell you right now is that I sorted out several dozen that people gave me that they had collected, and ordered them in trays and numbered them, and called up a man who is a soil and geology specialist at the University of Pennsylvania. And I told him that what I had from Brazil were rocks that had been collected from people in Mato Grosso do Sul, in a place called Corguinho, from falling out of the sky on September 15, 2002. And would he be willing to look at them and give some kind of whatever they could find? And I was expecting, we don't have time for that, or it will cost you $10,000, or, you know. But I was asking, and he said, well, your timing's perfect. We've got a brand new X-ray diffractometer that we want to try on substances that we don't know what they are. He said, bring them down. So, starting about 2 weeks ago, I had really hoped that I might have something here to show you definitively, but I can at least say this, that I took all this stuff down and expected that maybe by the time I physically had everything in front of him, it's a very respected geology department at the University of Pennsylvania, that he might take one look and say, oh, it's what's one of the common explanations floating around? I think they call them Mookie marbles or something. And that he'd say, oh, no, you know, we'll be wasting our time. Instead, there was silence, and he was looking at the rocks in all the trays, and he just said quietly, no, I don't think I've seen anything precisely like this before. And he became interested. They took several samples. I talked with him 3 days ago just to double check before coming here if I would have anything, and he said they're going to be working on a timeline of different analyses. They are going to have to cut into some of the rocks that they've got, but that he will be doing a full X-ray diffraction report to me. They will be doing what they call petrographic microscopic photographs, And I am, personally, I'm very happy about this, because whatever they come up with, it will be one of the chances to work with a really credible department on something in which, at this point, as Nancy said in the work she was describing last night, you have the challenge of getting good reports from scientists who will put their names on the reports with institutions in anything that even comes close to something in the unidentified flying object field. It makes no sense that we have to be constantly coping with those kinds of obstacles. But in this case, it's absolutely true. And whatever they report, they're going to report with their names on it. In the University of Pennsylvania, and it's absolutely all that I know. It was a rain of rocks that came down out of the sky. 23 people were there, collected these rocks. A guy was able to videotape some of them landing on those ceilings. And whether or not any other part of the story ever is discussed with the geologists, we're hopefully going to have some very interesting results. And John Schuessler of MUFON has asked me if, as this goes on and there's more to report, would I at least present the latest science, because Levengood is going to be presenting at Dearborn and MUFON in July. So I think right now I will also be there to try to keep unfolding this ongoing story that, to me, is one of the most fascinating places that I have been, Corguinho, Brazil. The Urangier Oliveira house and the bedsheet and the ceiling truly are unique in the so-called literature. But beyond Urangier Oliveira and the farm, when you travel around, the farmer on the other side that I've reported about at Earth Files, which is its own gigantic story, where they have seen for decades, perhaps centuries, the farmers who live in that area have watched white, yellow, sometimes bluish lights come up out of the ground, move in the air, travel and go into that big mesa, come up out of the mesa, go and fly around in the air, expanding, contracting, expanding, contracting, going down into the ground. Decades, perhaps a century at least, of reports. Is it the same phenomena that is somehow involved with the mysterious lights in the crop formations of England? Is it the same kind of sustaining temperature and heat that's in the Hessdalen Valley of Norway? What are these mysterious lights around the world? And could Massimo Teodorani, could he be pointing in the right direction, that some kind of an advanced intelligence knows how to program and manipulate plasma in a way that is incomprehensible to us, but can do work and monitor and give information for other kinds of interactions? That is the big question. What role do these seemingly intelligent plasmas play in an interaction between Earth life and perhaps something else? Urangier Oliveira would say that that's something else that can manipulate and work with plasmas are the tall blonde humanoids. Others would have other options. I don't myself know where anymore to say, where does the matter reality that we are sitting in this room stop and start, and the possibility that we could rheostat, if we had the technology and the know-how, electron, proton, neutron, even separate the strong and weak energies so that we could pass matter from one place through what looked like a solid wall or a solid roof, and that at some point in some distant future that might be as common as turning on and off a light switch. And somewhere between now and then, it may be that the next huge unfolding science that is still in some kind of fledgling state in which just a few scientists are beginning to pay attention may have to do with one of the most common parts of the universe, known as plasma, that makes up the sun, and we see it in lightning bolts, we see it in the corona borealis, and that the people in Corguinho, Brazil, and Hessdalen, Norway, and other parts of the world may be chasing and interacting with somebody's programmed and manipulated plasma. I certainly don't have all the answers, but these mysteries keep me going, and I hope it keeps you going, and I hope I'll see you here at Eureka again, and thank you. I have an announcement. Thank you very much. I feel almost like we're a family here now. I have brought 3 examples of these stones. I have them in Ziploc bags. And I'm going to go out into the table out where Erica Festi is. I'm going to sign books for those of you who have asked me, could I please sign? But I also thought it would be extremely interesting to you to be able to handle and see, for those who are curious. I'm not going to take them out of the bags, but you can see and feel for yourself these very unusual rocks, and know these are 3 of, we don't know how many hundreds, that came down on September 15th in that rain of rocks. So if you're interested, stop by.
Eric von Däniken's hypothesis will have an increasing effect on society, science, literature, and art. The search for extraterrestrial intelligence is a concern that affects all of humanity.
For me, it's like souvenirs of the past. Some of our human forefathers had contact with extraterrestrials. They were here, they visited us, they were in contact. Something happened in the deep past, and it will happen again in the future.
The author of the sensational international bestseller and the most compelling non-fiction publication of all time is back in London for the first time in 25 years to celebrate Chariots of the Gods' 50th anniversary. Eric von Däniken Legacy Night. In this 2-hour special, you are invited to share with Eric his most influential discoveries and revelations. Learn about his incredible life journey as an author and researcher. Meet the team behind the highly anticipated Chariots of the Gods 360-degree entertainment franchise. Eric von Däniken Legacy Night, live streamed from the Princess Anne Theatre, BAFTA 195, Piccadilly, London, October 15th, 2016. For more information and to purchase tickets, please visit zoharstargate.com.
High up in the mountains, in a tiny village in where there are never more than 140 people at any time in the year. The valley is surrounded on all sides by large mountains filled with iron, copper, sulfur, and quartz. Like this huge outcropping of quartz that a group of us sat on to have lunch one day this past August. These gigantic loaves of quartz were all over the mountains there. Back in 1982, many people were reporting mysterious lights, and on September 25th, 1982, at 7:30 in the evening, engineer professor Erling Strand from Oslo was in Hessdalen to investigate, because so many people had been reporting seeing all of these strange lights. Again, not structures, but lights that could glow with intensity, and some were being described as filling a valley with light. And as an engineer, he was baffled. What would be the energy source that could sustain over time that kind of intense lighting? To his amazement, he saw a large, bright white light that moved up above the hill, swinging right and left, and then beams emitted from the light, pulsing on and off for more than an hour. Professor Strand was determined to find out what the light was, and by 1984, he began a scientific investigation known as Project Hessdalen. To keep a constant surveillance on the valley in August of 1998, he built what he calls an automatic measurement station on the side of a hill. The station now has 3 cameras which are triggered by certain frequencies of light events, and the cameras interface with computers inside the measurement station. The station now operates 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. Here is Professor Erling Strand from
Eric von Däniken's hypothesis will have an increasing effect on society, science, literature, and art. The search for extraterrestrial intelligence is a concern that affects all of humanity.
For me, it's like souvenirs of the past. Some of our human forefathers had contact with extraterrestrials. They were here, they visited us, they were in contact. Something happened in the deep past, and it will happen again in the future.
The author of the sensational international bestseller and the most compelling non-fiction publication of all time is back in London for the first time in 25 years to celebrate Chariots of the Gods' 50th anniversary. Eric von Däniken Legacy Night. In this 2-hour special, you are invited to share with Eric his most influential discoveries and revelations. Learn about his incredible life journey as an author and researcher. Meet the team behind the highly anticipated Chariots of the Gods 360-degree entertainment franchise. Eric von Däniken Legacy Night, live streamed from the Princess Anne Theatre, BAFTA 195, Piccadilly, London, October 15th, 2016. For more information and to purchase tickets, please visit zoharstargate.com.
Now, here is a little bit closer map, and it shows here where we are.
Jeg har alltid vært nysgjerrig på ukjente ting, og ting som kanskje ikke så lett å forklare.
Subtitle. Oh, if you can't read it, strange and unexplained light.
Jeg heter Erling
My name
Strand
is Erling
og
Strand, and I'm a
forsker på
researcher.
UFO-fenomenet i
This is
Hessdalen.
UFO phenomena in Hessdalen.
I begynnelsen så ville ikke
Originally,
folk
people did not
snakke
want
med
to talk
hverandre om
about it.
dette her. De tørte ikke.
They didn't dare.
var,
It was
så
too
merkelig.
strange.
Den etablerte
The
vitenskapen
scientific
reagerte jo
establishment reacted
negativt på
negatively
disse observasjonene.
to these
De kom med
observations,
sine egne
and
forklaringer
they had
uten engang
their
å ha
own
vært i dalen. Da reiste jeg opp her for å kunne
expectations
se
without
dette
ever
her
visiting the
selv.
valley.
Jeg
And
ble
when I
heldig å
traveled
se
up
det
there,
selv
I was
første
lucky
dagen.
that I saw it
Det
on
var
my
et
first
sterkt
day.
lys,
It was
og
a
det
bright
lyste
light,
opp
and it was
bakken.
in the up in
Det
the
som
valley
forundret
below.
meg mest, det var intensiteten.
What surprised me
Da
the
visste
most
jeg
was its
at
intensity.
befolkningen
That was
hadde
when I
rett. De
knew
hadde
that the
sett
local people
noe
were right.
ukjent.
They had seen something unknown.
Da ingen etablerte
When
vitenskapsmenn
none of the
gjorde noe
established
forsøk på å finne
scientists
ut hva dette her var,
attempted to
så
find out what
startet
this
jeg og noen
was,
kolleger vårt eget
colleagues and
prosjekt.
I started our own project.
Her har vi apparatet som
This apparatus
har et
controls the
kamera
black and white
påmontert.
camera, which
Det
monitors the
kontrollerer om det
appearance of
kommer et ukjent
unfamiliar
lys inn.
lights.
Med det nye systemet kan vi ta
The new
opp og
system
beregne
enabled us
avstand
to
via flere
calculate
kameraer.
distance.
Og ved to
Two
kameraer,
cameras function
akkurat som
like
du
a
har
pair of
to øyer,
eyes,
så kan du da beregne avstand.
which is how we measure distance.
I løpet av 3 år har
In
stasjonen
3 years,
registrert
the
nærmere
station
100
has
observasjoner.
made nearly 100
Noen
observations.
ganger det som en gul
Sometimes it is like a yellow
rødt
ball,
lys
a
som
red
beveger seg
light which
irregulært.
moves irregularly,
blinkende blå lys.
blinking blue
Det har
light.
blitt målt med
They
en
have been
hastighet på
measured at
30
speeds of up
000
to
kilometer i timen.
30,000 kilometers per hour.
I begynnelsen kalte alle dette her
At
UFO,
first,
men
everyone
det vi
called
har
them
sett så
UFOs,
langt
but what we've
ukjente
seen so
lysfenomen.
far are unknown phenomena. There is still no theory about what this data is that we have. The more I work on this strange, the stranger it becomes. Why do I do this? To prove to science that there really is something here, and to make it acceptable to people to talk about their experiences without being ridiculed. It's a familiar theme, isn't it? Well, end of that videotape. No. Everything is silent. It's another peculiarity in the crop fields as well as in Hessdalen and in Brazil and in other places. Some of the lights flash for only fractions of a second. Here is a time-lapse photograph taken overlooking the Hessdalen Valley by Dr. Massimo Teodorani, astrophysicist from the Institute of Radio Astronomy in Medicina, Italy. All those yellow-colored flecks are mysterious pulses of light that have been caught on this time-lapse frame that he and Italian colleagues and Erling Strand's Norwegian engineering team think hold the answers to a potential new energy source in plasma physics. That's what's keeping these guys going year after year. They think they're on the trail to something unexpected, unidentified, but that the thermal and light characteristics of Oslo standing next to the measurement station that he calls the blue box. He teaches at the School of Computer Science at Oxford College in Sarpsborg, south of Oslo. To date, the cameras at the blue box have recorded more than 100 light events, of which 79 remain unexplained, including this photograph of the orange-tinted object taken by the monitoring station cameras on October 9th, 1998 at 6:16 p.m. local time. Then on December 4th, 1999, a little more than a year later, a videotape camera caught 12 seconds of what the scientists call a thermal plasma of unknown origin doing the strangest dance across the sky I think you will have ever seen. And now we're going to play this videotape. It happens quickly, and we're going to continue on into a Discovery Channel excerpt with Professor Strand about his research. This is in the day. And watch over here. No one knows what this is. But this is what people see in the Hessdalen Valley of Norway. And it has the glowing characteristics of a plasma with a strange motion. And now we're going to go into this segment with Professor Strand, done for Norway, Discovery Channel, on his work. Sound up full.